Hey everyone, welcome to This Week in Tyranny. Thank you for joining me. My name is Konrad Rogoz. We're coming to you here on Sunday, November 24th, 2024. It's episode 103. It's going to be a big episode, and so there's not going to be a presentation like with the last two. I had to research, I had to familiarize myself with the topic. The story was brought to me. So it's going to be a pretty big episode, I think. I think we're going to hit more than an hour. So, yeah, my website is truthandlaw.com. I'm on the onegreatworknetwork.com. The presentations are also going to have a website separately, so I've got a lot of things working. But for this week, I'm focusing on this. It's a big story, and it's important because it affects people, and somebody's going to have their property taken away from them, and nobody's going to know about it. So this is the kind of story that I want to blow up. I wanted to get some more attention because there's a personal connection to this. What's going on is the Montreal, Quebec, Canadian government, however you look at it, is forcing a family out of their home that they've lived in and owned for 40 years. They're going to give them money for it, but what they're actually doing is forcing them out of the house. They're doing this to repurpose the home to be a ventilation station for the underground train system, the Montreal Metro. So on November 12th, this just happened. The Société de Transport de Montreal, it's called the STM, that is the agency that takes care of the bus transportation, trains, right, the subway in Montreal. They presented their plan to build a ventilation station on the Lee family's property. Lee family's been there for 40 years plus. This property is located on Bellechasse Street in the borough of Rosemont-le-Petit-Patrie. So this is a neighborhood on the west side of to the west of the heart of Montreal, but this is the heart of the city, right? We're talking about right in the city. Now, the transit service argues that it's necessary to replace the aging and underperforming facility between the Beaubien and Rosemont stations. So, basically, the way it works with underground trains, metros, like big ones like the New York one and the Montreal one, they have to let all the air out because the train goes through the tunnel and all this air is getting pulled in and pushed out. So, this is an older metro. It was built in the 60s, right? So that is not shocking. Now, the story gets deeper. What I actually found out, thanks to my source, who actually knows someone from the neighborhood, I found out that the government approached this family 3 separate times. So this is nothing new. The struggle is actually going on for 6 years now. And they were originally offered $700,000 for this house, and then they turned it down. Keep in mind, this is an area where condos sell for that amount. You got, sections of these buildings that are going for those prices, and now we're talking about the whole building, right? So I'm going to show you this here so you could see. You could see how much these units are going for. It's really a joke. Of course, they're lowballing them because they're looking at the building, and they're thinking, okay, for us to sell this for that amount, these condos, it's going to need to be renovated. I'm sure that if it's an older building, they now have all these new regulations on top of it. I don't know if they built with cloth wires over there and what kind of materials they used, if that will all have to be replaced. But I'm sure to be up to date with all the new regulations that they surely have in Montreal. This is just me playing devil's advocate, okay? I'm going to be very fair with this story because there's no need to embellish anything. You'll see as we go on how deep and extreme the level of theft and injustice is taking place here, and more, okay? Then the STM came back anyway, and they reevaluated the building, and they dropped this offer to $570,000, and the family has until January to leave. January, they've got 2 months. They're not sure where to go. This is from an article. They said they've been offered considerably lower than market value in the midst of a housing crisis. The demolition is scheduled for fall 2026. So a whole year is going to go by between this family has to leave this house and before they start. Now, once they start in 2026, the work will take 3.5 years and could include explosives. So 4 years this is going to take, right? So from when they have to leave, it's going to be standing there for 5 years. The STM hired an independent commission to lead a public consultation. This is so community members would have the chance to express their opinions on the new project, the STM says. And this is a joke. I've heard of this before. The government brings in some type of action that's totally egregious, and they call a public consultation to let everybody vent their emotions, to let everybody talk, and they put a figurehead up there to kind of ease things, right? To have a sort of an outlet valve for people's for people's frustration, rightful frustration. It's just a joke to me. This consultation is just a public relations move. But my source sent me a report I watched where a journalist talks to two people from the neighborhood who are opposing this move. They went to this public consultation, and actually this woman, she said it was a so-called public consultation. It was more like an imposition session. Indeed, that's what it is. It's an imposition session. This is like the king getting up in front of, his what do you call it when the people, not his constituency. He gets in front of the people he rules, and he tells them what they're going to do, right? And they can say whatever they want, but ultimately it's not going to change anything. Now, this brings me to like a big misconception that I want to address, because there's a shared sentiment that people hold, which is the sentiment the government doesn't care about the people. Everybody kind of knows this. People who are reasonable, they have different levels and different iterations of this sentiment that the government doesn't care about the people. They only care about themselves, or whatever that justification is, whatever that next sentence following is. I'm bypassing now completely that whole section of the population that actually supports the government and thinks it's good. There are plenty of those people too. But I'm talking about the people that could see through the lies, right? The people who are rational, who can kind of see. They still are misguided. All of us are misguided, because the truth is the government does care about the people in the context of them as a collective crowd. They do care a lot about managing that crowd, what that crowd is thinking, what the crowd is feeling, and how the crowd is responding. That is why they call these consultations. They don't just have a maverick type of way of acting that they're just going to push something through and not get any feedback, not get any measurements, not get any reports on how the crowd is responding to what they're doing. And that's what the word people means to them. When I say the word people, I'm talking about a number of individuals. I think of them as independent one from the other. I use the people in a very grassroots way, referring to the individual. But the people, that phrase, especially the way the government sees it, it's a crowd. It's like a group of chickens. And that's the way the government cares about the people, guiding the crowd to make them behave in a way that is manageable. And if you're doing that, if you're taking like a group of chickens, you're leading them towards the cage, if you've ever done that, you don't have to worry about one chicken in a scenario like that straying away. If he strays away from the group, you don't have to worry about him, because you know that if you can just keep the group moving in a particular direction, eventually that stray chicken will rejoin the pack. They always find their way back to the group. This is how we are. Again, we don't have leaders. We don't have democracy. In the reality of things as they actually are, what we have is chicken farmers. And like George Carlin said, you don't have rights. You have owners. They own you, and it is just it's just a different way to say that. We have chicken farmers, and then you have the group of chickens. That's us. And I think the chicken farmer domestic policy analogy is crucial for understanding the world. If you've listened to George Carlin, rest in peace to George Carlin. you will recognize that. It's amazing how comedians and artists tend to be, specifically comedians, tend to be the best at really making you realize these things that I do and try to do in every episode, week after week. But comedians can just say it once, and if they're really talented, you will then somehow see. This is what happened with me when I was younger. This is how I really got to see that this stuff is real. It's a joke. Everyone laughs, but under the surface, this is something true that he's saying. George Carlin was not the only one, but he was likely the best. You got to give a mention to Bill Hicks there. Yeah. With all that being said, there are two stories actually here with this whole thing. One is about the individual. The one, it's a singular family. It's the Lee family. They've lived there. They're being forced out of their home that they own and they have lived in all their lives. That's one story. The other story here is about the collective. It's about the social engineering in Montreal, and it is about the greater global plan of the United Nations, of modern urban management. It's this story where we're seeing it again and again. There's a crowd of people. The people as a crowd are being led somewhere. They're being led somewhere for a particular purpose. There's an agenda that is out front and center. It is. You can read it, you can research it, you can see it being implemented. That's the other story here. I don't want one to get lost in the other. It is really two separate things. And the majority of this episode is going to be about that collective perspective. It's turned into a specialty of mine lately, like connecting these singular events, especially having to do with cities and the environment, connecting these events to the bigger picture of that behind-the-scenes agenda. But I want to begin with the individual perspective. I think we often fall into thinking of the crowd. This is how we think, because you have to worry about your neighbors. You have to worry about what kind of neighborhood your children are going to grow up in, right? We're worrying about, is there going to be a mob outside? Is there going to be traffic outside that's standing in my way, right? Is there going to be a power outage? If there is, what's going to happen? So, and then on even a broader scale, societal scale, we're always thinking about what the best way is to fix the people, to fix the crowd if it's out of control, right? To fix the crime, to fix the drug addiction. We think about these things as collective issues. They're really individual issues. So it's all the more important that we constantly recenter, we reorient our mind from the community, from the global, to the individual. This is not a flock of chickens we're talking about. This is a family of human beings. It's a person with an entire history behind them, with an entire life experience just like you. And the individual's experience in the world is totally overlooked so often. We ourselves tend to focus so much on the mass movements, on the shifts of the groups of people. And it's because when you live in the crowd, when you live in a city especially, but even if this could be, you could be living on a farm somewhere. We treat people like crowds. And when people are treated like a non-distinct chicken in the crowd, you tend to think of yourself that way. And I think that upcoming public consultation they're going to have, again, about this expropriation and the upcoming construction, I think it's going to demonstrate that. They're going to have another one. And for sure people are going to vent. They're going to talk about a whole lot of things, but I doubt they're going to talk about the individual psychological level. I know a few people will, but generally when this happens and you get a bunch of people together to voice their concerns, so maybe let's not say that I'm talking about this specific group of individuals, because I see a lot of these neighbors are becoming active and they're fighting back. But generally when you get a kind of a public outreach and you get a bunch of people together, you're going to get the voices that are going to be the loudest. It's going to be the lowest common denominator. They're going to, you can see it in what people see right now in America, let's say, as the big issues. They're going to talk about immigration, right? They're going to talk about China. It's like very low level, two-dimensional, introductory problems. You know, the complicated stuff, the behind the scenes stuff, where it comes to integrating whole systems analysis. This is never going to be the prominent voice in a public outreach. And it is because of the collective thinking. It's just people do not behave intelligently in groups. That's just the fact. And it's because very few of us spend our time thinking at the individual level. No one even cares about forcing people to leave their home and tearing out their roots. Most people's primary concerns are going to be, how do I get to work? Road closures due to the construction, the noise. They're going to ask about the noise. Most importantly, the traffic it's going to cause. This is the way I see it. And while those concerns are absolutely important, the primary here is the individual. And that doesn't mean venting emotions and throwing a tantrum. I'm talking about being focused on rights and focused on the value here. What is valuable to whom and why? And if there is a value system, let's be clear about it. Let's be clear about the government's value system here and what we are valuing as the people who are signing off on this, right? We're paying the taxes, we're voting. What value system are we signing off on? Let's define what it is in black and white in very certain terms. And then let's ask ourselves what we're actually working towards. That would stop something like this in its tracks. But that's very hard to do in a conversation with a bunch of people. It's hard enough to do when you're recording by yourself, where you can actually focus your mind and think about this stuff. That's hard enough. It's because we don't have practice thinking at the individual level. Being taken from your land, being taken from your home, I hope it surprises people. I hope it shocks people, right? This is kind of a shock factor to it. Like, oh my God, they're removing this family. I can't believe this. We think we don't live in this kind of a world, but we've actually always lived in this kind of a world. I'm not trying to normalize it. I'm just talking about the history of humanity. Whether you call this expropriation, whether it's eminent domain, whatever it is, forced relocation, the government has always had the power to move us off of our land. This is actually an Asian family, and unfortunately, ironically, one of the best examples of this is in the United States. It's the World War II Japanese internment camps. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, when the Pearl Harbor false flag occurred, okay, and Japan, of course, being a part of that, they joined on the side of the Germans and the Italians. You had camps. You had regular citizens. Anyone who had Japanese descent was actually put in camps based on no evidence of any kind of working with a foreign power or anything like that. Another example of this is my family in Poland. This actually happened to my family. My mom was born in a place called Nowe Czarnowo. It's a village in northwest Poland, right by the German border. I wasn't born there, but she was. My grandparents lived there. It's a small village. It today has 660 residents. I think it had more, but this is, a village like that, it's hard to find these demographics, and I didn't spend a lot of my time researching the demographics. But essentially, this village was built in the forest. You have homes. There was a hospital there, and this forest is actually the Crooked Forest, the infamous Crooked Forest. It was a national landmark. There's a lot of interesting things about that. They still don't know to this day how those trees got to grow like that. You see them at some point going parallel to the ground and then curving back up. That's for a different episode. Now, my family actually left this village, including the hospital that my grandfather was the head of. And that was because the construction of a power station. They built a generating station, Dolna Odra power generating station. Of course, you had the power removal, the forced removal, the construction. It closed down the hospital, and then there were more people affected. Again, the details of this I don't necessarily have, because you don't get books written about something like this. If you don't make a video about it and put it on the record, this isn't a big city, so there wasn't a lot of information about this. It lives only in the memories and the stories, the way that I got it. That's just an aside to how important it is to get things on record and speak things. If there's history, tell it. So here, for me, history comes full circle. For me, at least. And here in this episode 103, my friend brings this story to me. And 103, by the way, my father was born 10/3, October 3rd, 103. And we're talking here about being removed from your homeland, right? The fatherland, so to speak. I just see this as quite poetic. I, of course, am an immigrant, right? I am someone who left that land. I left the land to come to America. Then when you think about the neighborhood that this home is built in, that they're going to repurpose as a ventilation station, it's right in a neighborhood called La Petite Patrie, which means a little fatherland. It's like Little Italy, but literally the word means little fatherland, right? Like a new village of your of the former land. Again, this is what there's the French, of course, the French roots of Montreal. We all come here to the New World, right? We all left our lands, the people who are here in America, to live a different life. And look, I've never been very paternal. I don't have much regard. I've never had for cultural or national traditions. I've never been concerned with race. But I don't forget or forsake my people, my language, and my history. And I'm not talking about any kind of flag or national anthem. I come from a family of warriors. These are people who lived the principles of freedom through World War II and the Soviet occupation, and before World War II, of course, it was an occupation then, right? The Russian Empire, the Prussians, all the way down to the Holy Roman Empire, and all the way back. Okay, we've always been under occupation, and I'm proud to say that I have warriors in my family, people that fought back, people, the people with medals back when. Being in a military doesn't mean you're going to third world countries. It means you're fighting against an unstoppable dictatorial force. People were sent to Siberia, right? Who were hanged for teaching my language. My grandfather was in the underground, right? In the little. He was very young at this time, so. But that is how it was when the Nazis came in, and later. Even if you had sticks and stones, these were basically like 16, 17-year-olds. That's who wanted to fight, because everyone else was killed or gave up. Now, not to romanticize my nation too much, because I'm glad I left. I'm glad I left because I see my entire life as a revolutionary act, and Europe to me is fallen. This is where the war is. There are generations of injustice to answer for. And I am here at the spearhead of this, like where you still have freedom to the greatest degree that it exists in the world. And this is kind of the cutting edge of the new tyranny, actually. There are generations of injustice to answer for, and I am out here to get some answers. You know what I mean? I'm here to get this shit done, to make this shit right. And, 60, 80 years ago, Central Europe, Poland, that may have been where the war has been. No longer. The war is actually in the internet in a crazy way. And it's here. It's here, especially Chicago, Montreal. This is where the new resistance is. So this stuff, thinking about that, inspires in me a real anger and a stubbornness. This family in Montreal is being removed from their land. I think about my roots, like the roots of a tree refusing to be pulled out. Um, Again, I'm not somebody that romanticizes my lineage, but when you try to fuck with it, I'm going to stand up on behalf of it. So, let's talk about roots and culture a little bit, right? Montreal is a beautiful old city. It's all about roots. The cities we live in, they have a rich history that we should remember. And with Montreal, for God's sakes, the name Montreal means royal mountain. It's built on a mountain. Mountains have always been a symbol of rights and power, right? Moses received the law of the God of Abraham on Mount Sinai, right at the mountaintop. In Greek mythology, you had Mount Olympus where all the gods lived, right? All the Greek gods. Again, gods and royalty. Royalty is all about lineage and history. Now, of course, I'm against royalty as far as ruling over someone. That's a joke. But to think of ourselves as royalty in a way that it carries the treasure of our family's trials, triumphs, and experiences, our memories. We are royalty through our virtue. If we live the principles of love and freedom, we teach that to our children. Our parents taught that to us. That is a royal family. We absolutely are a moral elite in this world. But, so we shouldn't respect roots? Like, where do we think rights come from? The earth that gave birth to us. It's natural law. And now, the same cities that were born on these ancient natural wonders, they're getting reshuffled and they're getting hollowed out with this construction and replaced with a gray, homogeneous, plastic square mass. My friend sent me a video from the 70s, and I was just shocked. It wasn't a central feature of this video, but I was shocked at how the cars looked like. The cars had so much personality, and the people did as well. The way they dressed, the way they just seemed to have more life. They were just happier. The cars especially struck me. What old cars look like on the street, in the same kind of streets that, the same streets that I drive down. This was a video from Chicago and Indiana. So, and then I looked on my way home yesterday, and I see 4 cars in front of me. 4 different kind of cars. A pickup truck with some red on it, a minivan, a smaller vehicle, and then another SUV. Different cars, technically different colors. But if you really just zoom out for a little bit, I look at these 4 cars in front of me, and it's the same car. It's the same gray, half-rounded box. No personality, no individuality. This is the kind of world we're building around us. I'm looking even at the equipment in front of me. It's all half-rounded, square, black. We think of that as aesthetically pleasing. It is insane. Okay, it's just a sleek lab. It's a sleek science lab is what it looks like. It's just black and a little bit rounded to mimic style. There's no style in this world anymore. And just for the record, I'm not saying that your bloodline itself is your roots, because there are plenty of people that are Polish and they aren't worth a damn. They're not my people. They're the same ones who sold out the warriors to the Nazis and the communists. You guys are not my family just because you're related to me. If there was somebody in my family and they were morally, mentally, and spiritually against what I stand for, I don't care who you are to me. I don't care if you're my mom. I don't care if you're my brother. You're not my family. You're my family through our shared values and experiences. And by the way, that's what DNA is. DNA and genetics, it's a generational imprint of shared experiences. It's really a record. It's like a blockchain. It's a record of choices made, of actions taken. Of course, now, family that experiences that, of course, those bonds are there. So I'm not saying that, genetics is not important. But I'm saying the reason genetics is important is because it reflects people who grew up together, who experienced similar things in similar environments. So it's about a lot more than just birth. And people think, the point of this whole thing about family and roots is you have power and you have gifts. You have a birthright. Acting like it is the key. You gotta act like it. And that brings up a crucial point about rights, and people think that our rights is something that is written down in a document and that makes it binding somehow. Like the fact, as this family's finding out, like the fact that you have a deed to your house or a document showing you own it, we think that that's going to be respected by a court or government just because it's true and accurate. But in the real physical world, it comes down to just who can exercise their will. The claim behind it, your actual claim of ownership behind it, it's only a claim. Yeah, you own it. That is the correct claim. But you need to be able to exercise your will. Okay? If somebody tries to take it. This is a main point of this episode is this call to action. Who's going to stop them? We have to stop these people from taking over. Now, when it's all said and done and the dust settles, yeah, the stronger claim's going to win, yes. It matters who's right. It matters that this family owns this house and the city has no claim to it. That's true. They need to leave them alone, even if they have to shut down the entire Montreal metro. Like they put down there's this image, there's this meme of the train coming down the train tracks, and then there's one person tied to one rail, and then there's a switch, and then to the other rail you got 3 people tied down. And this is to make it's a fallacy, but this is to confuse morality and make people think about the greater good, right? What is better, what sacrifices have to be made. I'm not making no sacrifices of human life. Even if they have to shut down the whole metro. If they don't want to leave, they have no reason to leave. They're not in the way of the station. The station is in the way of them. So really, just because the right claim will win when it's all said and done, it doesn't mean morality wins on its own. The most effective force wins. Okay? The stronger win, and then they have to carry the moral responsibility of what they've done. That's how it works. Sorry to say. Now, the world would be a beautiful moral place thanks to that law, thanks to the way that works, if humans had real self-love and self-respect. We don't need a court to make the right decision. We don't need to vote the right person in. Here's what should happen. No one would be forced out of their home to build something over it if they don't want to leave. Why? First of all, because if someone tried it, the neighbors would stand in front of the bulldozers, straight like that. And if it came to that, then any self-respecting person who is driving that bulldozer, who is working, they would take the keys out, they leave the bulldozer right there, and they quit their job on the spot. That's what I would do. That's what would happen in a society where people love themselves and respect themselves. That is all you need, and then tyranny just doesn't happen. The people actually have so much power, okay, so much force out there if they learn to be influencers, or if they, influencers, agents of change, real thorns in the side of the government, real Karens. The archetypal Karen who is like a pain. She's going to complain. She's not going to let you push her around. She's going to make a big deal out of something. She's going to make your day really bad because she's going to yell. She's going to be snarky and all this. When it comes to, an institution like this, bulldozing over somebody's house, that's the time to be like that. A real Karen. By the way, this week also in Montreal, a college student started a petition and actually got Montreal to remove fluoride from the water supply in a few districts. It's actually not that simple because supposedly the water's not in the Montreal water supply, in the public water, but in a few places of the town that it was still in, they're going to take it out now. I'm just pointing that out there, that protests and petitions, I kind of wave those off, but the truth is, if you make enough noise about something, it's going to get changed. But anyway, that's the very important individual angle there. The main point is that nothing the right side doesn't win just because it's right. Nothing gets done unless you make it happen, and we have the power to make it happen. And that power is originating from a history of choices. If you don't have a history of choices, you need to begin that history. Every tree, starts from a seed somewhere. So every day we have opportunities to plant seeds. And at the end of the day, if you just risk your life and get stubborn as hell, you're going to be able to stop a lot of tyranny. You're going to wake up a lot of people. There's nothing actually more beautiful than not sacrificing, risking everything and being willing to sacrifice it. The universe rewards that. Life rewards that. Ever since I started living my life that way, I haven't gotten hurt physically. I haven't gotten arrested. I've gotten a couple of strikes on YouTube. That's about it, Other than that, I feel safer than I've ever been. I speak about things that people think you would get locked up for saying. I'm not getting locked up. As a matter of fact, when you get loud like this, a Karen is probably not going to get cuffed or punched in the face because she's already made too big of a deal. Again, what are the institutions concerned with? Public relations. So if they're looking bad, they're going to be real hands off with you. As a matter of fact, if you are in the spotlight and you are speaking up, that's one of the safest places to be. It is when you're doing things, behind closed doors, leaking documents, right? Doing things secretively. That is when you get killed, unfortunately. And I'm not saying don't do that either. I'm willing to do that as well. But being front and center is a good bet. So let's go into what's going on in Montreal on a wide level, though, and why. This is the collective part of this. This is the broad aspect. Let's start with the decision making of the STM and the government. The two of the people that are fighting this, their neighbors of these people, of the Lee family, they spoke at the public consultation. They were there, and they were able to get their hands on this information. The STM provided this document showing 7 different locations they considered as a location for this PVM. I believe it's post ventilation, mechanical ventilation. So PVM is this ventilation station. You see here, PVM existant, that's the blue box. That is the one that is in effect right now that will be removed and replaced with the new one. The new one is the green box that says site choisi is site chosen. You see, not directly over it, a little bit further away, that is the place they chose. And then you see all the red boxes, the sites étudiés, which is the sites studied or analyzed. They had 7 of them, right? Green is the family home. The orange line shows the Metro line underground. I'm surprised this document was ever released. But again, it goes to show who works for these institutions. It's going to be dumb people who don't understand what's going on. For me, I see this and I just laugh. It's like Tom and Jerry. It's like Tom the cat is trying to be sneaky, or like set a trap. He's going to finally catch Jerry. And Jerry the mouse obviously is seeing like the footsteps in the snow, and they're leading into a garbage can or something like that. Like the lid is half open. So I just laugh because they're really playing. They've been caught red-handed with this document. Okay, I don't know if it's supposed to represent they actually did their due diligence and studied many other sites, but they've exposed what they are trying to do and why. The first thing this shows is that the old ventilation station could just be renovated. They claim that it has reached the end of its life and has to be rebuilt. But what does the end of its life mean? The people asked that and they got no answer. Because there is no answer. Even if you have to clear the whole thing down to the ducts, really you would, you change the filters, you change the furnace. Even if you had to redo all the ducts, they're going to have to put new ones anyway. So there is no reason not to redo this station in the existing location. And the thing is, people think that a ventilation station is something complicated. I'm going to show you how complicated it is, okay? It's basically two ducts and a furnace. There's a technical review I found, design of a modern subway ventilation system. Got a little graphic here. You see the tunnels here, you see the station, and then these vertical lines going up, they're just vent shafts. One supply, one return. One is going to take the air out, and one's putting the fresh air in. And then you have louvered vents above grade, meaning, above the ground. It's as simple as that. You can, of course, have fans throughout that are circulating the air. I mean, simple stuff, there you go. You see it's supply air, exhaust air. Now, what renovation could that possibly need? New furnace, new ductwork. It's called a gut rehab. Like if you want to redo your house, you keep the foundation and you keep the exterior walls, and then you just put everything new and redo it as you would want to. It makes no sense to excavate a whole new foundation to basically rebuild the same thing for no reason. The only thing that could possibly make sense is why they would not use the same one is if they need a wider duct and they just need a more air traveling through the ducts. They would have to enlarge the opening, which could be difficult to do with the ducts being right above the station, right? Like how are they gonna enlarge it? Here they're gonna blow it up with dynamite. If they're going to enlarge it and this duct, like where is all the debris gonna go? But I personally think this is bullshit. I think the obvious option is to redo this one, but I'm just being, again, I'm very skeptical when it comes to this stuff. But seeing this now, that they don't want to redo the existing location, just looking at it from a construction worker's industry of construction perspective, it makes me think that they just want a large new project to keep busy, to make money, to maintain the contracts. That's not that wouldn't be the first time I've heard of something like that. And that's corrupt, but it's not necessarily sinister. Okay? Where it gets sinister, to me, location 4 changes the way I see this whole thing. By the way, this orange line, you see the distance between the Beaubien and the Rosemont stations where they're building this? They're 700 meters apart. It's half a mile. It's a 10-minute walk. And they have to build it here. And by the way, isn't it amazing that this building is at 532 Rue de Bellechasse? 532 is the third solfeggio frequency, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. But 530 hertz is mi, M-I, right? Do, re, mi. And of course, we're talking about me. We're talking about public versus private transportation. We're talking about taking the me away and replacing it with the we. That's the address of this place that they chose. And the street is called Bellechasse, and chasse means hunt. So Bellechasse means like good hunting, pleasant hunting. I don't see it as a coincidence. I absolutely see this, what they're doing, as a hunt. They have all these options, and we see the eagle on the dollar bill. The eagle has been a symbol of these regimes for a long time. This is a bird of prey, like a hawk or an eagle, singling out a chicken from the flock and snatching them away. That's why they're choosing this home. And I'm going to talk about the other options they have. Because here we are talking now about subversion. We're talking about intentionally making the neighborhood worse and intentionally increasing human suffering. People need to start thinking on that level and get rid of this societal Stockholm syndrome that we have. So, location number 4, if you look at this on the maps, you see 532 Rue de Bellechasse. I marked this on my phone, and then you see there's like a little store right below it. And right past that intersection, they have this nice little beautiful green tree at the corner of what is a youth court, the Chambre de la Jeunesse. I've been learning some French, okay? They could have built this right there, and it was actually one of the locations proposed. They just have to cut down 2 trees and build it right there, and basically you have a location right there in close proximity to your metro. When they ask them why they don't do it, right? When these two neighbors that are becoming like community activists that are fighting for this family's home, the government they gave is that they're not in the business of expropriating government land. So the fact that this is a courthouse, a government courthouse, they will not do any work on their property, even though it's public property either way. So that really exposes that they want to start messing with private property. This shows to me now, here it's very clear, it's admitted. Very obviously the point is not to build public infrastructure, it's to remove private property and turn it into public infrastructure. And I could have told you that before, but I went into this without prejudice. I'm surprisingly skeptical when it comes to things like this. I don't assume every little thing is tyranny. I don't assume every little thing is subversion against human freedom, because there's too much evidence out there to focus on ideas that are arguable. I focus on reality. I deal with reality, the black and white, the front and center. When I accuse someone of tyranny, I'm damn sure they're tyrants. So let's get to that. And forget the head of the STM, the Montreal Metro and all that. We're going to go right to the head of the Montreal government. Montreal, why is it significant in the global picture? It's the second largest city in Canada, ninth largest in North America. This Montreal Metro, it's the third largest metro in North America. It's behind only New York City and Mexico City. So this is gigantic. Now, if I was one of these United Nations puppet masters trying to bring in a communo-technocracy, I think I would personally have one of my people, maybe as the mayor of a city like Montreal, definitely doing heavy work on urban reorganization and on public transportation. So meet your mayor of Montreal, Valérie Plante.
I would say that for me, the ecological transition has always been part of our vision and how we want to move forward, and also how we want to position Montreal. So I see it from kind of two ways. The first one is, how do we put concrete action into place in the city, whatever it's planting trees, protecting lands from development, how we have this very bold decarbonizing building plan, which is being saluted everywhere in the world, how we're putting public transport. So all these things. And so that's concrete action in a concrete plan with concrete objectives. And then there's the other side, which is complementary, is about how we position Montreal as a leading city in the world. And cities can be recognized for different things, but to me, being a leader, we're the leader in Canada for sure, and definitely in North America. I'm now the North American vice president for the C40 network, because we've been able to position Montreal very strongly. So I want people, like tourists, visitors, future students, investors, see the quality of Montreal as being like, okay, this city is really into the ecological transition in North America and everywhere in the world. And what I've been saying a lot to the government is, yes, you need to act on decreasing emissions, right? But you also need to work on adaptation. And on both sides, if they want to reach their goals, they need Montreal. So we're ready. We know what to do. Bring the money.
You heard about ecological transition. I've talked about what that is. Protecting lands from development, meaning keeping the city trapped in. Protecting from development is a crazy phrase. Imagine you want to protect your child from development, And then decarbonization, of course, which means deindustrialization, which means confiscation of property. But you see, this person, I was surprised. This person is very well trained to present these ideas with an energy. She actually sounds pretty good. She sounds like she actually believes in what she's doing. And I appreciate a good liar like that being put forth. I really like that this is a very talented weasel that is being put there as the Montreal mayor. This is good. I don't want sleepy Joes. I don't want easy pickings. I like to see someone who's skilled in manipulation. So with her, you shouldn't be surprised to learn that she is the vice president of the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group, global association, coalition of megacities started by Bill Clinton, with Michael Bloomberg in a major role. Of course, it's not officially United Nations, but of course, it's all UN dogma. You shouldn't be surprised that Valerie Plante has presented at the WEF and is listed as a partner on the WEF website. You shouldn't be surprised that her political party is called Projet Montreal, which means Project Montreal. And just read about Project Montreal. Even surface level Wikipedia stuff, Project Montreal advocates sustainable urbanism, which is the application of the principles of sustainable development to an urban setting such as downtown Montreal. One of the party's proposals consists of building light rail in order to do the following. Light rail is the metro, underground trains, in order to reduce car traffic, give more room. By the way, reduce car traffic doesn't mean make the traffic better. It means get less cars. It means get rid of cars. That's one. Two, give more room to pedestrians and cyclists. Okay, I've talked about that. Increase the residents' quality of life. Very ambiguous term. And reverse urban sprawl. Urban sprawl is the city expanding. So to reverse urban sprawl would be to start cutting the city back and making it smaller. Indeed, that is what it's all about. Project Montreal's 2009 platform elaborates commitments for 7 major aspects of urban living. Renewal and expansion of participatory democracy. Again, democracy means the crowd of chickens. And when you let the crowd speak and get a loud voice, you're going to get a very low level argument that is very easy to counter. Number 2, affordable housing and reinforcing socio-urban tissue. I'm not going to comment on all of these even. Sustainable transport, of course, you have public transport and active transit. Active transit is active mobility. I talked about it 2 episodes ago. Active mobility means riding a bike. You know? For environmental sustainability, again, you could tell this is United Nations. Economic development, yes. Culture. Culture. What a term, culture. What they say is culture, right? And 7, accountability and public services. A lot of corporate language, a lot of neutral stuff. Now, let's look at some of the examples of the way those bullet points manifest in real life. This is from an article that I found, very recent. Get ready for a heftier tax bill, Montrealers. Montreal Mayor Valerie Plante's administration unveiled its $6.99 billion financial roadmap for 2024, with the mayor calling it a responsible budget with a modest increase in spending. Municipal spending will rise by $235 million, or 3.5%, from the previous year, largely because of the rising cost for things such as snow removal, garbage collection, and gasoline. By the way, why are those things rising? Because the city is making it more difficult to do those things. There's like a war on anything garbage, right? It's harder to recycle. You have to follow these regulations. Snow removal, because I'm assuming they don't want to use the salt, right? Because it's corrosive, it's toxic, right? So more difficult ways of getting rid of snow and ice. What you really need to do is get the big fucking trucks with the big diesel engines and pour the fucking salt, and you need to clear the snow, okay? I know it's going to kill some plants, but, you know, there's a nuance there to living in the city, okay? We're not going to be perfectly harmless, okay? At the same time, we don't need to be like a bull in a china shop. And gasoline, why is gasoline going up? It's because there's a war on hydrocarbons. Continuing with the article, cities are at the forefront of global upheavals, including the opioid crisis and climate change, and face growing needs related to homelessness and mental health care, Plante told reporters. In other words, What's homelessness and mental health care? It's redistribution of resources from well-functioning people to not well-functioning people. And that's not me making judgments. I'm not being judgmental. I've been bordering on homelessness, being a drug dealer and drug addict. And I've also been a mental health patient. I used to have severe depression. Okay? So it's not the pot calling the kettle black. I'm just saying you're taking money away from people who have their life in order. You're giving resources to people who don't have their life in order. And when you don't have your life in order, resources don't help, because you don't have an orderly way to organize them and make use of them. Another article, this is further down in the same article, I believe. Business owners will also be hit with higher property taxes, with some areas seeing staggering increases in the double digits. More money for public transport and police. Some of the city's largest spending increases are for public transit. The city anticipates spending an additional $48.4 million in 2024. Of course, public transit and police, strengthening these things. Separate article now. This is the new one. Through the headlines on Montreal's 2024 budget released in November, focused on property tax hikes, it also included something more transformational, the city's first climate budget, also known as a carbon budget. And this is why Valérie Plante is the vice president of the C40. Montreal's at the forefront. All of the stuff they're talking about, okay, that they're having their wet dreams at Davos in the World Economic Forum, their fantasies of control, sustainably, it's being implemented in cities in Montreal and a city like Chicago. But Canada is further ahead because of their European affinity to socialism. It's because tyranny has had a lot more centuries to work on these people. Okay, I don't have anything against Europeans. It's just you've been put through the meat grinder, in a much more long-term traumatic and horrible way. Same thing with Canada. Just there's not enough of an edge. We need to have an edge about us, about the people, and then overnight, again, I'm talking about planting the seeds. Even if you don't have a history, if you don't come from a line of warriors, you can start that line. Back to the article. The budget, which sets a cumulative gap on Montreal's emissions out to 2050, is designed to act as an accountability tool for Montreal's Plan Climat, a community climate action plan with the key actions to reduce emissions for the whole island of Montreal by requiring city council and staff to consider climate change in all investment decisions. The budget has a potential to push climate action forward and deter spending decisions that increase climate pollution. Remember, I talked a few episodes about ESG, environmental, social, and governance. It's an investment principle. So you're seeing the same concept now in different places under different language. This is the same concept. Okay, the Plan Climat, and then the ESG that is coming down from the United Nations. And it's just a general, nobody knows where it came from, but it's a general principle now that for a business to get grants, okay, to get investors, right, to get a positive image, again, corporations are all about public relations, they have to support these agendas, these globalist agendas. They have to, claim they're pro-environment and they're pro, they're decarbonizing, because that is the way the agenda is presenting itself. Okay, it's really so crazy. There are so many interconnecting layers, but bottom line is, they're doing a very good job in Montreal pushing this through. If anything about this surprises me, it's how systematic and clear the situation is in Montreal and in my city as well, Chicago. This is the part that really baffles me, and you see it, like, I almost get stuck after a while because of how far along this plan is, but really how difficult it is to untangle, to explain to somebody that something that nobody knows where it came from. That's just a general mindset thing, a general widely held belief, right? How that actually is a part of a of a global world domination takeover, which sounds crazy, but it's really the old world. It's really just business as usual. But then connecting those dots is, of course, it's an art and a science. It's difficult. And speaking of systematic, look at how systematic this is with Project Montreal. I mean, it's clear. Look at this progress. They began in 2004, so you see their first election. They get only one councillor, right? Then Valerie Plante comes in. You see, that is when the party wins. Again, they got someone who's well trained, who's skilled. They work systematically. This is how it goes. Now, here you're seeing. I'm not saying that politics is all, is all controlled, or that it's not controlled. There's a nuance here, and there are competing factions and there are competing interests. Even though everybody on a general level is part of this agenda, is advancing this agenda, but it's not, a one-size-fits-all, us against them. These people are the royalty and everybody else is the slaves. There are a lot of people, they might be our neighbors, that are advancing this agenda, and they don't have all the connections. This is very real world stuff, and in the real world things are not black and white, they're nuanced. That's all I'm saying. This is an incremental takeover, it's piece by piece, and this has become a recurring topic in my episodes lately. What I'm talking about is the traffic, the road traffic. That's a spearhead of incrementalism, and Montreal has become infamous for its traffic. I was surprised to learn this. I thought it was just in Chicago. I learned last night that street after street after street in Montreal is a one-way street. But that hasn't been that way for a long time. And really, it makes me think, now that I think about it, in Chicago, have they always been one-way streets there, on the north side, downtown? I don't remember, truthfully. How do you remember if one street becomes a one-way? Again, this will only be oral history. Okay, moral history. That is a nice term. We should do something with that. But again, this would be only the residents would know that. Nobody's making videos about it. Nobody's writing books about that, right? The incrementalism of globalist, environmentalist, one-way deindustrialization. I don't know any books like that. So in Montreal, these have been slowly introduced since that Project Montreal party went into power around 2016. Slowly, they've been turning them into one-ways. So you're getting a whole lot of traffic that is, it's a big deal in Montreal, even more so than Chicago. Now, why else is there so much traffic? They have construction all over the city there too. Understandable. They got old streets, old city. Work needs to be done. I get it. But I've already talked about how this works. This is unofficial now, but it becomes increasingly obvious and clear to me. Road construction is intentionally mismanaged and delayed in a subversive way, meaning to sabotage the space where you're working, to discourage driving in the city. That is the goal. Discourage driving, make it impossible to drive, make it unbearable to move around in the city unless you're moving around in a way that advances the agenda. That is especially clear in Montreal, where often these traffic cones, they remain on the job long after the job has been done. So the job's done, everybody's out, they've moved on, but the cones are still there and they don't pick them up for, days, weeks, months even. So we're talking about road closures just for the sake of road closures. And of course, if that wasn't enough, they also built many of these bike lanes, the bike paths, same as Chicago. Okay? And the parking is expensive as hell. If you want to park in the city, you work there, you're talking about a very likely, half of your day's wage. Or even if it's 20%, I mean, that's huge. All of these things make it unbearable to drive in the heart of Montreal, and that's the point. The point is to remove those who value their own time and money, and leave only those who use the city services daily, who support the city, who like the lifestyle, and they want to get rid of those people who use their own resources. Okay? And they're not ready to just throw themselves in and be part of a global village in this new way of life. But the new way of life is actually not new. I alluded to this. All this stuff about sustainability, it's actually unsustainability. The push to lower the carbon emissions, like that, you're seeing one of the solutions is now carbon capture. You're going to see more and more elaborate schemes to get this zero emissions goal. It's actually going to be more unsustainable. It's a pass the buck type makeshift solution. All this stuff about sustainability and environmentalism. It's like driving 5 miles further to throw the garbage into another dump that doesn't have as much garbage there. Like, we think this stuff is some high-tech, enlightened stuff. It's not. Because now you need to build ventilation stations. You're going to need to build more electric vehicle charging stations. You're going to need to have more compost vans out there. You're going to take up more space because you're putting more resources in to deal with the waste in a way that removes your undesirables. You're going to need to spend more money on that. You're going to have more bicycle rental stations. In fact, the bike lanes themselves, that's a wasteful use of space. I thought we were against urban sprawl, right? Well, what's more urban and suburban than, putting your little helmet on and then having a whole part of the road closed off and curbed out so you as an individual could have all that space to yourself to feel safe on your bike. You want to talk about selfish and suburban and speciesist and and entitled. What's more entitled than that? But we buy their morality, their value system. We actually believe it. We've been told that our self-interested human way of life is toxic. But actually, as we're starting to see, this sustainable new lifestyle is doing the same, just as toxic. Same tear down and rebuild, same old construction. Where are the electric bulldozers? That's what I want to know. Are those low emissions vehicles that are building this stuff? It's the same noise. It's the same wasteful use of space. Burn money. But there's an interesting wrinkle, actually, about this when it pertains to Montreal specifically. Because here, just like in Chicago, they're attacking the principles of the old world. But in Montreal, they keep its aesthetics. They don't want to build a new building. They don't want to actually build a whole new square black structure. They will take these homes and turn them into ventilation stations by hollowing out the inside, building those ducts underground, but on the outside keeping the appearance of a family home. And there are other places. This is one, actually, in the neighborhood, I believe, that has been converted into a ventilation station. You see it. Now, why are they keeping the appearance of the old world? If sustainable urbanism really is better, if it really is more advanced, why isn't it more beautiful? They know they can't put a square concrete building with louvered vents on the street corner because why? Why can't they? Because that would bring the issue front and center of urban management, of who's in control and what are they implementing. Instead, they create the traffic, they create the road rage. Why? Because then instinctually and subconsciously, you think that your neighbor is the enemy because that's who you see in front of you. That's who you see behind you honking at you. Who's the one making your life more miserable? It's the damn cars with their exhaust fumes, right? They put that front and center. But they're going to keep that facade. They're going to keep those buildings, right? So that you don't see what they're actually building, what the cost is of this new lifestyle that you're being pushed into. You get mad at the person in front of you. You don't remember You don't think about who created the conditions to put you two against each other, you and your neighbor. And in fact, this new global system is being built by the conflict between us. The old system of control was built by a lack of knowledge. It was a knowledge imbalance. It was a skill and information differential between the rulers and the slaves. That barrier has basically been broken because there's now an access to information and skills. There's a information abundance, okay? But that access is clouded. It's actually flooded by an infinity, an overflow of choices, too many choices, and people cannot find the right door to the choice, so to speak. But what you really have is the same. You have people that have all this knowledge and the skills, and then you have us, the slaves, who technically could get the knowledge and skills, but we don't know how to find it. We don't know how to focus on it. We don't know how to dedicate our time to it. It's the same. Again, the new system is not really much different from the old. Where they differ is in what they consume, what they run on, their fuel. So the fuel of the old school system, okay, industrial capitalism, you want to call it patriarchal system. The old system of humanity was natural resources. It ran on natural resources. The earth with all of its abundance, we consume what the earth gives to us. We live off the earth. We drill into it. We extract the oil from it. We toxify it. All of this is true. Now, what's the fuel of the new school system, the global progress sustainable system? Their fuel is not natural resources. Their fuel is the old school human being that was running on natural resources. It's just that they're a step back in the food chain. We are their fuel. And that's unsustainable because people like that don't grow back. Natural resources actually, nature actually has an amazing ability to renew itself. We can renew ourselves as well, but it's an incredible act of will to recreate, someone, This is why we don't have many children, and we raise our children for a long, long time, compared to a mammal that, gives birth, or an insect that lays a bunch of eggs, and then, a bird is only in the nest for like a few weeks and then it can fly. With us, it takes more work, right? So when we're talking about this food chain, this new system, it's consuming us. We are their fuel. Once they run out of us, this species is going to die. It's actually a suicide mission. I've talked about that before, but that is really deep and psychological, and really it should be saved maybe for a presentation, which I will not do this week because, as you can see, this is a long show. Don't have as much time. It's worth mentioning though. This food chain, or the human society, in the food chain, producers convert natural resources into a new product. That's photosynthesis. That's, how we get all of our food and resources. It's a product that the consumers live off of. Producers make the products. People who can't produce, they make a deal with the producers. They consume the natural resources. They consume the products that the producers have created. That is a sustainable way to live. That is the natural order. In the current world order, the producers take the resources, the producers try to work with the resources, but the consumers are actually taking away the resources from the producers, and they consume the producers. There's more to say about that, but it comes down to being a self-destructive mindset, and it reflects what lies behind this socialism, the collectivism, the globalism. What lies behind it all is self-hatred. It's self-loathing. All the way down to the emphasis on public transportation versus a private car or private home. This wouldn't happen if we didn't have a deep belief that a single human being or that a human family isn't worthy enough to stop a crowd, and to say, hey, you don't have a right to roll me over. I live here. If we believed in our own human value, if we knew our actual value, this wouldn't happen. So at the end of the day, we're fighting for justice. We're seeing this injustice, but there's plenty of injustice in here, down to how we treat ourselves, down to how Michael Tyranny calls it sadism of the self. We are so abusive to ourselves, really. How we tell ourselves that we're not good enough, that we can't get this done. The things we eat, the habits we continue to persist in, right? How we actually spend our time. We've, again, fallen into this tyranny and being our own tyrants and tyrants of our children in the home. We're supposed to stand up and say, hey, you're not taking this family out of here. People seem more likely to defend a homeless person on a sidewalk in front of a bulldozer. Well, why not this family? That it's essentially the same idea. This new urbanism, the sustainable green way of life, it's still the old paradigm. What is the underlying theme here is that someone must starve so that someone can feast. It's the same old system. So it's actually not a new way of life. It's morally identical to the old way of life. It's the law of the jungle. It's still, you have to take it away from one person so that another person can have it. There is no symbiosis here. There is no harmony in nature. There is no harmonic resonance on 530 Rue de Bellechasse after the government takes it over. Now, what I'm saying about us needing to be the more effective force, right? I'm saying that morality doesn't win on its own. The stronger will wins. When I'm saying that, I'm not professing the law of the jungle. I'm not saying that we have to just be about force and we have to just kill all these people that are advancing this agenda. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the gentle, the loving, the peaceful human being has to have enough will and ability to survive in the jungle. We have to speak the language of force to those people that only speak the language of force and violence. And that's why I'm not in a rush to leave the city. I'm going to stay in the city of Chicago because I know the language well. And when it comes down to it and the violence kicks off, I will have a field day. I cannot wait. Not because I want to see human suffering and death and destruction, but because I hate injustice and I've seen enough of it done to people in my life. And more importantly, I've seen how much injustice I've done to myself. I've mistreated myself worse 1,000 times over than anybody can do to me. But I know that this is because I took on a way of feeling, thinking, and acting that was based in self-hatred and self-destruction. I didn't know that at the time, but being in a crowd, this is what we take on. Now I know. So now I cannot wait, because going through that, knowing who I am, knowing where I come from, my will is greater than whoever I'm going to come across. That is the way I approach these things. So I love living in the city, as cool as it would be to live off the grid. I'm not going off the grid. At the end of the day, the goal of these city programs is to drive the self-respecting people out of the city. And it makes sense. I don't blame anybody. Everyone has a limit to how much they can take. People are tired of being treated like they're subhuman, and then they're just going to leave. The United Nations and the technocrats, they are okay with you living off the grid. Off their grid. They're not really concerned if you got your generators and you got your food and you got your biodynamic agriculture. They want you off the grid because you are trouble to the grid. You are the biggest threat to the grid that they're building. So I won't go away quietly. Although I know that the New World mental disease is entrenched here in the city. I know that it's going to be a lot harder to set up, to build and raise a family here. But at the end of the day, this is our city, not theirs. So I'll tell you, like I told the last guy who thought that I was a guest in this land. I talked to somebody who was born here, and he disagreed with me that I have a right to call this home because I'm an immigrant, legally or not. You know, he took offense to that. So I told him, who's more American than me? And I leave you guys with that question, because that's what you tell somebody who's trying to remove you. Who's going to take me out? You? Like, this is my land. Not by blood or birth or contract, but by action and principles. It's your land and it's your world, and this is your home. Anybody who speaks the language of force in response to that, then we respond accordingly to them. I'll leave you with that. Thanks so much, and I see you next week in This Week in Tyranny.
I see life different, authentic, so magnetic. I'm out for connection. The world seems fake, but life is just so damn alive. This is no depression. If I'm cryptic, it's for your own protection, no secrets. I can tell you about the hidden message.